Hi, welcome to Well-Rounded Mama's YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us in your second trimester of pregnancy, where all this month we'll be talking about the second trimester. If you find this video helpful, like, subscribe, ring the bell. So Sarah and I have been talking a lot about the second trimester because the second trimester is when you feel amazing. Your energy should be back, your appetite should be back. You should feel great. It's exciting because you feel movement. Better. Okay. Great might be too high of
an expectation.
Better. You should feel better.
You should feel better.
But we thought it was such a good time where you start kind of collectively deciding, do I want a childbirth education class? So last week we talked a little bit about childbirth education. Do you want to breastfeed? And how do we get the education on that? So you kind of start looking into like your education when you're feeling good. And one of the things that we thought we would talk a little bit about is parenting in general. How you feel about becoming a parent, whether it's for your first time or your 100th time.
100th?
Is there somebody who's had 100 babies? Okay, don't have 100 kids. Regardless of what number kid this is. So Sarah was doing some homework and I have a couple thoughts too, so I'm gonna let Sarah speak.
Well, one of the things that we like to talk about during our prenatal visits is just conversations about parenting. This is a great time to start some of those conversations if you haven't had them already. Even if you have, just kind of bringing some of the stuff up again so you can revisit some attitudes that you might have towards certain things. Like, what are your attitudes or expectations about discipline, eating solid foods, or traditions that you grew up with? We all kind of have our likes and dislikes about our upbringing. There are definitely some traditions that you might not want to carry into your child's life. But then there might be, some really amazing memories that you have about, Sunday dinners or, just whatever that looks like for your family. Not just thinking about all the awful things that happened to you when you were a kid, but about the good stuff. Like what are some things that you would really like to carry on?
Regardless of whether the pregnancy was like completely planned or like kind of a surprise, I think it's always such a good time to reevaluate yourself, where you're at, what your childhood looked like. And I think pregnancy is such a beautiful time to heal. Using it as an opportunity to heal and replace some of those kind of, like Sarah was saying, some of those kind of more negative kind of experiences. I think especially because every generation does a little bit better than the generation before them. I don't know who started with the first generation because that had to be soups bad.
Well, they were literally raised by a pack of wolves.
They were raised by no one. They were just... It was Lord of the Flies.
For real.
But they were too. Every generation does like a little bit better. I think sometimes the time that we maybe kind of muck it up again is when we go too far that other extreme. And so that's why I think visiting what parts you like, what parts you didn't is so important. And I think it's such a good time in your second trimester with your partner. I think lots of date nights when you're feeling amazing. Date night. And that is like blanket at the park maybe, because it really opens dialogue, and it opens dialogue about how you feel, because how you parent is going to change. Ideally, you go in it with an idealistic idea and then it changes. And you and your partner have to be willing to communicate and learn and grow as that parenting changes. I remember for Adam and I, when we wanted to have kids, his parents every time would be like, well, it's going to be way harder than you think. I was like, why would I even be trying to do this if I didn't think that I could do a good job? And I went into it, even if I had rose-colored glasses on, right? The expectation is you go in with rose-colored glasses and then you kind of go, okay, so maybe the nursing thing isn't going as easy as we had hoped, and now we have to reevaluate, where can my partner support me while this was a little harder than I thought, and opening up those lines of communication. Communication is key.
The important part is to kind of go into it with an idea. Like, we definitely thought the same when it came to discipline. Like, I felt like my parents did a really good job disciplining us. And then I had kids, and they taught me a whole slew of new lessons. And that form of discipline did not work. And in my humble opinion, so in my own opinion, I honestly think that you can't necessarily go wrong as long as you are consistent and have like a united force. Like as long as you both are on the same page. Where complications happen is when maybe you don't agree with something that, you know, your partner does, or your partner doesn't agree with something that you do. And then there's like this talking as you're trying to discipline your child, somebody else is saying that what you're doing is wrong, and that's going to cause conflict and confusion, and the rules won't be necessarily taken seriously. So I think as long as you guys can show like that mutual respect for one another.
And I think that there are strengths and weaknesses to each human, right?
Sure.
So me and my husband have different strengths and weaknesses. And so there's some things he does really well and some things that I do really well. And
Right.
I think when we had enough trust in each other, that even when we didn't really understand why the other person would do things one way or another, that we kind of, I think, appreciated that each one of us brought different strengths. My husband potty trained all 5 of the 6 of my children, and he did such a good job. And then he was not in a position to potty train our 6th child, and I was left to that. I did not. I don't think Reese is potty trained to this day.
He's 16.
It was a really hard thing, but
Yeah.
Adam really did a good job at that. And so I really loved and commended him and was ready to support him. Like if he needed me to be a certain way during that
Yeah.
process, I was willing to do that because he did a really good job at that. And then there were times where maybe I have to talk my husband off of a ledge on some things because he is a little quick to get angry, and I have to say, can we talk for a minute?
Yes.
In our room? Yeah. And then we have a conversation where we reevaluate. And so I think those open lines of communication, the respect for each other, recognizing that you each bring different things to the table, and that's actually a really good positive thing. Parenting can be a very healing thing as you go through it, kind of rediscovering who you are as a human, what you're capable of, and what your kids are capable of. The second trimester is so good for these types of conversations. What does postpartum look like? Even though you're not in postpartum or you're not in your last trimester, what does parenting look like? Even if it is this rose-colored glasses, we're going to hope for the best kind of scenario.
And even if you don't have an active partner, still spending that time to sit down and
point.
journal, like some of your, you know, like what are your beliefs towards all of these things? I think it's important to think about this beforehand. And if you have somebody that you're going to be co-parenting a little bit with, like if you live with grandma, you know, if grandma to that kiddo is going to be present, having these conversations with them, or anybody who's going to be living with you and your kid.
Sarah actually totally brings up a really good point, and that is, how are you going to communicate your own parenting styles with your parents, grandmothers and aunts and uncles, and what are those boundaries the two of you guys are going to set? Or if it's just you, what are those boundaries?
Yeah.
I think those are all good topics, but
I think so.
happy second trimester.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you'll tune in next week. If you found that video helpful, share with your friends and share below what the best parenting advice that you ever got was.
Love it.
Okay, okay. I'm going to call you Sherry
You're going to call me Sherry. Hi, Sarah.
for this video. You be Sherry, I'll be Sarah.
Sounds good. Yes.
You should feel good. Better, best. Better, best. Best, better. I can't remember. Never mind. We're moving on.
There are some traditions that
I was raised by a pack of wolves, so